Okay, so what I've done, I've got a little hat here that I made 3 years ago, and I'm a bit over it. It's cute, but not cute enough for 2022. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little brim extension. So I found a brim block that is approximately the same slope, not quite, but it's good enough. So I have estimated that if I've joined this wire at 51 inches, God knows how many centimetres, and I've just sprung it so that it's sitting reasonably well on this block. And if I place the hat on top, you can see that gives me an extra 4 or 5 centimetres on the width of the brim. I'm using this window Sinamay because I'm a bit of a fan, and I think it's going to be rather nice. So what I did was I cut it on the true bias, and as you know from your previous bias brim, you know that can stretch. If you cut 0.8, and I made it a bit of a generous 0.8, but if you cut that, and that can stretch around. So what I did also was I estimated come out, go back, and it needs to overlap there because you need a little bit of a distance there between the edge of the brim and the edge of the Sinamay inside there, so that it's not creating a hinge. You know, when you join two things nose to nose, they can rock and roll against each other. So I've estimated that this is 80% of the circumference. I haven't cut it off because I'm going to model it for you, and hopefully it's going to make sense. But you'll join that using your bias brim. I've got my join for my wire here, and around about now I'll be using quite a bit of steam and or moisture from my water, because you know how Sinamay is a bit inclined to snap, crackle and pop if you work with it dry. So what I'm going to do, it's a little bit of a cheats manifesto. What I'm going to do here, and I can sew this seam by hand. So if I didn't want to take it back off the wire, I could do it while it's on the wire. So here comes steam. Pishy pish. Thank you very much, Fiona. I see what you're doing. And then I can just gently stretch that around. And because I've got it on the true bias, I'd go mental if I tried to get every square to match. But because it's on the true bias, it's sort of enough to satisfy your average punter. Maybe not your perfectionist milliner, but you know, we've got to keep that in check. And see that starting to draw around there. So get to the next bit, and then just gently give that a bit of a pull, knowing that it doesn't have to come as hard as the full bias brim does, because we're not, there goes that on the floor, we're not doing all the way up to the headline. So just a bit of a stretch, a bit of a go on here. See how beautifully that's coming down onto the wire? That's all good. And I've got plenty to work with at the end. I can cut that back when the time comes. So and I'll just pin that over for now, and I'll talk you through the rest of it, and I'll do it properly another time.
Because it's window pane,
yeah,
do you actually have to sew a seam up the back, or could you fuse over?
I would always sew it up the back, and the reason that I wouldn't just fuse over is because I'd have little straw ends, so I would want to have it stitched in some way, and it doesn't,
because the window pane's so open. That's why I'm wondering.
Yeah. Well, you would go along a fibre line, but it's a very good question. I just want that to come right onto the wire, because you know how important that is, that you don't have Sinamay poking out beyond the wire, because it's a little bit low rent, that look. There we go, just a little bit more steam and a little bit more tension on there. And that's coming up all right. Now I'm just going to plonk a pin into here for now and pretend it's all stitched up and ready to go. Yeah, I think my trauma about having raw ends of the Sinamay poking out is greater than the trauma of seeing a bit of thread. So that's my logic there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm treating that as the centre back and that as the centre front. So now, with a little bit of steam, I'm just going to get that so it's sitting on the block. Now, you could do this freeform if you wanted to, if you're going up beyond the size of a shape that you had, but for convenience sake, having a block is going to make it easy. So this is starting to, can you notice where my iron is? It's not right down on the straw, it's floating above, and I can just use my fingers to get that down onto the block. And you can see there that just needs to tighten up a little bit more. See how that's sitting outside there? So I can just, this is the beauty of not stitching it up before you start. Although that said, if that's sitting outside the wire, the other thing is I can draw it up towards the centre, and that's going to also get that to behave nicely. Okay, so let's just say that that is now a ring of gorgeousness. Then, here comes my hat. Position that down on here. That's going to be the hat.
Nice.
Now, what we need to do, so that's where the block is really handy. The next thing we need to do is get a pin or two into it, because either by hand or by machine you will need to do 2 rows of stitching. One to attach it to the edge and the other to attach the Sinamay in underneath, and I'm going to talk to you about a couple of finishes that you can use. So that's one more, and I'll just put another wire at the back, and Renee, you'll see here that I'm beginning to look like the mother of the
Queen.
Thank you. No, she's dead.
Oh.
God,
the
Queen's
Queen.
barely
Mean
alive.
the Queen.
The Queen's not barely alive. So you can see me now. Yes, it's changed the character of the hat quite a bit. Okay, now here I have, that's where my first line needs to be, right near the edge. So I could run around that with my sewing machine. And again, you will notice, I will notice, no one else will. With something like this, because you know that the public see what they want to see. Then you've got the wicked problem, that is the raw edges here. There's a couple of ways you can do it. One of them is that you can turn this under neatly and then and I would do some kind of hand stitching there, because I wouldn't want to see another machine line on my parasisal. I don't think I'm that kind of person. The other one is that you can get a piece of braid or ribbon or something like that, and you just run that around underneath. And that, again, you'd have to hand stitch, that would be perfect, but stitching it by machine, invisible thread, worse things have happened to better people. And that, my friends, is as much as I can tell you about doing a brim extension.
Voila.
Do you reckon you could do that? Yeah. And that overlap is going to be plenty, and I've changed the feel of the hat by doing that. And there'll be a bit of dismantling before I remantle. This has been blocked in one, so it's quite a simple hat. So that's going to change it to something else. And if you see it in my spring collection, you'll know where it came from. What do you reckon?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.